I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call special city council meeting to order, and on your ten motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
And second.
Same.
And moving second, any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried 5-0. Number 4, 2024 budget review, Herbel.
Yep. Well, let's just think, how do I want to do this? How about I just open the floor to you guys, whatever questions you have. Let's get that into order, and we get to a certain page, we'll go through certain, like, general fund stuff like that. If there's any general questions you guys have, I think I'd start with those, trying to get those out of the way.
Could I make a statement first? Okay, I'd like to thank the council for considering and coming tonight for this meeting.
Maybe turn that one down a little bit.
Which one is it?
I don't know.
I think it was mine, I touched the thing.
And I just want to remind them that it's our responsibility for the final budget with the help of the individual department heads. And I need to remind you of the revenue neutral rate, which is 65.873. We can get the same amount of money as we had last year. And if we hold this budget as it is now, the new rate will be 74.774, which is almost 9 meals more. Thank you. Now, my first question, Grogan, is on page 3, and I mentioned this to you the other morning on Kansas State Statute 13-1, 270. Did you find anything to replace that, since that's non-existent?
What statute was it referring to?
It's 13-1, 270.
That's on page 3.
Yes, it's the third item down.
So KSA 13-1270, saying utilities having bonded indebtedness is what statute that is.
It's not 1.3.
The comment should be more top.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies that. It's been that way for several years. Okay, and then the next item is the utility fund. It shows a transfer to the equipment reserve of $80,000.
For which year? This year?
Yeah,
That was the sewer machine?
for 20, no, excuse me, it should be for 24, I guess.
Okay, so let's hit the equipment reserve real quick since we're on
Well, okay, I didn't catch it. Okay, go ahead.
page 10. The transfer from utilities at the top, that's 45,000, is half of a skid steer or a mini excavator, not both. The 93,000 that says transfer utilities electric and then has the skid steer mini X, that's supposed to be off. That is for the eventual lease purchase of a bucket truck. That gives us 1 full year, should give us 2 full years of payment on a lease purchase on a bucket truck to replace our current lease that we have going on now.
Where was that?
That's page 10. It says transfer from utility electric B truck. It's 93,024.
Okay, then I also noticed that there's like 6 transfers from different funds,
Yep.
and we're increasing those funds. Is that really necessary to increase them just to transfer it over to the equipment reserve?
Yes, ma'am. Well, we're not increasing them to transfer over. These are year-end transfers that says our department heads did a good job. They came in under budget. They saved some money. We need to build an equipment reserve and reward these departments for looking out for what our best interests are. These are year-end transfers, they don't have to be done, these are the schedule, that way they can be done, so we can build an equipment reserve for these departments. That way, down the road, they can come down here to you guys with the purchase of a fleet truck, like I said last time. And you say, he goes, here's the departments that wanna chip in, here's the amounts they wanna chip in from their equipment reserve, here's what they're currently sitting at, here's what we wanna do. This idea is to help build out an equipment reserve and an equipment replacement plan for the foreseeable future going forward. So we can replace equipment that's on the verge of needing to be replaced, and we have the funds set aside, that way we don't have to budget for it in that exact year. We can go back and say, we've been doing this for 5 years, we're well set, we can go into our equipment reserve and do it.
Okay, down at the bottom of that, it says, cash balance, December 31st, 0. So we spent all the money in 1 year. We're not building a reserve.
Well, that's showing if you spend everything, that's not.
Well, you're gonna spend it, you know. You're
Well, we're not gonna be able to
you're
spend
gonna
it, because this is only half of a skid steer or a mini X. Our bucket truck probably wouldn't get a payment in 24, because it's at least, they're saying at least a year out. So that would be 45 to 48,000 out of the 93,000. So we're gonna have plenty of carryover. We can't guess how much unencumbered cash carryover we're gonna have out of that fund.
And then it says cash forward 2024 column, and it has 78,000. Where's that coming from?
Where are you at now? Are you still on equipment reserve?
Yeah, I'm still in equipment reserve.
That's from, the year prior, that would be,
I can answer that.
as I said, really low.
So what happened about 5 years ago, the state of Kansas said on these forms, we are gonna put a line that says cash forward. Prior to that, there was no line in the 24 column that said cash forward. For 35 years prior to that, you put in capital outlay, you put in some type of equipment, you did not have a cash forward. So what's happened here now is that 78 might be spent up in another line item, okay? And the reason we do it budgeted to 0 in the 24 column is because that gives you complete budget authority in case you have an emergency. If you have an emergency and you don't have that, and you put the 78 down in where the 0's at, then you would be less in budget authority by 78,000, and you'd have to amend the budget in the middle of the year. It's just a convenience factor to not have to go in and amend all these budgets, but in these funds that have either transfers or fees, you go in and you budget them to 0.
This is just more than saying, we have the authority, or
That's right.
Rogan, or whoever has the authority to spend that.
At 216.
It's not that we are
That's
spending.
right, absolutely. Yep. And that's kind of, even for the public, that's kind of hard to understand, because when you look at the publication, and I haven't looked at yours, but I had this question yesterday. If you look, the expenditures in the 24 column are, on page 13, are 9.5 million, 9.45. And in 22, they were only 6.5, but that's kind of confusing to people. But the reason that is because in the 24 column, everything is budget, even unencumbered cash. So if you spent 9.5 million in the 24 column, you would have no money left. And the reason that's done that way is just what we just talked about. The budget authority is given it the full authority so that you, if something come up, you would be able to spend it. That's why there's a difference between the 22 and the 24 in the publication.
Okay, and then column 2 under 23, it shows 15,000 coming in from, transferred from general fund in 2023. But that's not on the budget in 2023.
That's right.
There's a copy of it if you need it.
I'll get it. It's on page 7A, there's a transfer of 15,000 in the fund. 7A, there at the very bottom of the expenditures, it says transfer of equipment reserve on page 7A,
You're talking 24.
23 and 24. Okay, on 24's budget, on page 7A, there's a 0 in the 22 column in the general fund, and there's 15,000 and 15,000 transferred to equipment reserve, and that was the ones you were asking about on page 10. 15,000, 15,000, they both match up.
Okay, but I'm looking at 2023 budget, Scott. Where is the
We're talking
transfer?
about the 24 budget.
I know, but I'm
That may not
asking.
add this year. You know, that may not been in the transfers last
But
year.
I'm saying, why is it 15,000 in the 23 column is what I'm asking.
That's the city administrator card you guys purchased.
I'm sorry, what?
That's the city administrator card that they purchased, the city purchased.
But it's,
Equipment reserve, 15, on page 10,
oh, thank
that's
you.
what you asked.
Yeah, see this one here, right
Yeah,
here.
right there, so
But
that's
it-
the card you just talked
But
about.
it didn't show up on the transfer.
It wouldn't be in there.
So
In
why,
23, that's 23's budget,
I realize that, but this is a column for 23.
right? But what happens in budgeting is, it's like, this is the big picture. And each year that big picture changes. And we didn't know that, if I'm speaking wrong here, you tell me, but this is the way it's typically been. Okay, we're gonna buy a car, and all of a sudden, we can transfer. The way the state law goes in that, it says that a transfer does not have to be scheduled on the schedule to be a transfer in the next year if it comes up in a situation like that. The transfer is just like a regular expenditure out of the budget. And you can change it from a commodity, a contract service, or personnel services to a transfer from, like that right there. And that's probably what happened, I'm guessing. I'm pretty sure I've worked on this budget for quite a while, but that's what I'm guessing.
You bought that car in 22.
I don't know. 15,000 compared to 2.2. I mean, I'm just saying, I'm not sure.
Well, I'm just saying that, yeah.
That
Okay.
happens, that doesn't just happen in Marion, that happens in every area I deal with.
Then my next question is page 7A, economic development. Where did those figures come from?
7A.
That's, the Eco budget.
The reason I'm asking that, Scott, is it went up from the city office for 23 and 22. And it shows a budget of 85,000.
That's because it counts in the rec and the gold diamond budget, or is in one of those. I think Margot's actually community enrichment's the rec side, correct, from the city fund.
Well, Mark, those figures check out pretty good. I don't have a problem with that.
I don't know if you know what you said.
And then here's 22 and here's 23. 85,110. That's way over Mark's budget, as you know.
Right.
Tell me about the bucket truck. Do we have one where the lease is running out?
We have one that we lease and we're paying more than it's worth. We've already, if we were to just purchase the truck, we'd already own it. But we just have a lease agreement. So now we're stuck in a lease agreement until we get a new truck in.
We can't buy it.
We could, but you wanna spend $90,000 on a truck that we've already ran for
5 years.
5 years when we could spend $200 on a truck that'll do everything that Stephen is gonna need it to do and brand new.
How many miles is on this truck?
Like 15, Stephen?
I think it's 55 miles.
But the miles aren't what you're looking at, it's the hours that's on this truck. The size of this truck, it needs to be a little bigger, it needs to be a little more functioning.
Is this not one of 4 trucks that we have?
Yeah, we still have 30. We have one that goes up real high, don't we?
Yeah, but you can't get it in the alleys here in town. It's too big.
Basically, what the 12
Yeah.
Because we're so tall, they have to have that high range of
and this truck that we have now that we're leasing is big enough
Well,
to reach it.
tell
The
me,
other one we have is too big to get into the areas.
tell me why it's too big, why did you purchase it then?
It's what, how old is it? I think it's a 98. The truck we have now is too small to reach everything we need to do. The little bucket that you see running around on a daily basis, one that's out, that truck is too small to do what it needs to do efficiently and effectively.
Okay, can you tell me why you cut planning and zoning's budget so much?
Because I called around the state, I did my homework for everything else that I knew of. I checked with a couple people and found out that that budget was to do a comprehensive plan, and figured the best way to go about this is the normal planning commission budget around the state is anywhere from $0 to $5,000. I figured it was better to lower them down to $5,000, save roughly 3.5, 4 mils. That way they were still able to do their publication, still able to do this. The strategic plan just got done. It seemed to me like a reasonable way to try to save some money and still get things done.
I think when we passed the agreement with Wichita State for the strategic plan, we included PEC had something to do with a strategic plan to help offset the costs, which is why we didn't go with the, why we didn't go ahead and hire a, consultant, thank you. Right? Is that right, Mario?
I'm not, say that again.
When we hired Wichita State to help us with strategic planning,
Right.
we had included PEC engineering was involved in that to help us with some of the development side of stuff, right? And to help with, not a comp plan, but with some of the information that would be included in the comp plan, so that we wouldn't have to spend that amount of money on a consultant, which is why we didn't hire the consultant for planning and zoning last year when that money was budgeted. Because that was my understanding too, that was like $30,000 was budgeted for that.
Yeah, we were hoping that that information, that we could use it for the comp plan. Some of it we can, but, the money we budgeted, would have got the comp plan going. It would not have covered redoing the regs. But, Brogan and I are willing to work on it ourselves.
Brogan, what's the, on 7A
Okay.
for community enrichment?
Yep.
3/4 of the way down, why is there the big increase there?
So what ended up happening in the first one of these that we went through, street and alley was inflated to like 550. Obviously, it doesn't need to be anywhere near that high. So what we did is we took knowing that some of these funds were running closer in some areas, we knew that we needed to do increases. So we took what it was, and it turned out to be like $23,625 that we could put into certain funds. Well, we scratched off about 4, and we picked out, we picked out a couple that needed this thing. So cemetery got some of it, fire department got some of it. Make sure, library too. Library has had some issues with the building, infrastructure. It's going to go over this year, especially if we did everything that we needed and wanted us to do. Library's been pushing it closer. They're not as bad. The parks are now gonna have a full-time employee out of it. We have to do an electrical project, replace the boxes in the park. That's a major safety concern, so that's one thing that we needed to have done. So these budgets, if we would have kept them the same, would have been extremely close and over next year. So what we did is when we took those funds, we talked with Tiffany and said, we need to allocate these to a couple other areas to make sure that we can properly assess the value that's gonna be in these departments. Parks is gonna have a full-time guy, they've gotta do the electrical. Cemetery's gonna have a full-time salary taken out of it. Some other things, increases in the price of gas, we've had increases in insurance, we've had increases in utilities. These are all things that we're trying to make sure that we cover. That's why that one is so high. You got the full 23. Community enrichment is also going to be a base of, so the baseball complex is out. That's Margot's budget. Art and Park, Chiguasa, and stuff like that.
Does that include Margaret's salary?
Yes.
And then what?
Yeah, all of Margot, everything.
But as of the last of August, we had only spent 51.46% of that, as it was now before we increased it to 23,625. So I don't see a reason why we need to increase it.
Well, another reason that the increases aren't exactly going to be what I would consider a bad thing is any money not spent is going to go into our cash forward. Our cash forward, the way it sits right now, would only sustain this city for 13.5% of the year. Scott recommends 3 months in general and 6 months to a year in utility. To do that, we have to build these funds and move some more cash forward. That way, we have things for grants. Right now, we can't go out and try to get grants. Where are the match funds going to come from? We can't go out and seek these things to hopefully improve the city of Marion, do street projects. We can't afford to do that right now. We don't have the cash basis to be able to move forward with these things. So while they seem inflated, Margot may get 75% of it next year. She may get 80%. We don't know what the prices end up being, but if not, we're moving it into cash forward, which better sets the city up next year, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, to say, we're gonna go out for a CDBG grant for a water plant. Our cost share is gonna be $800,000. We have cash reserves that are able to manipulate these things. We're gonna go for a street grant, the same thing. That's where we have readily money available. That way, when we're writing the grant, we can say, we have this money right now. If you gave us the grant, we could give you our match funds today. That really helps when you're going out for these types of things. So yes, they are higher, but they are higher with a purpose. One, to hopefully cover the department, and two, to hopefully have a cash forward moving forward to increase our cash forward.
So what you're saying is that if we appropriate the money for a certain fund like street and alleys, it's not used just for street and alleys, it's used for everything?
No,
So
what I'm saying is that, let's just go community enrichment, that's what we were talking about. Say Margot only spends 80,000 of that 102. $22,000 can be moved into cash forward for the next year to help offset frankly, we don't have any cash forward. We are cash forward. The city needs to build its reserves, and this is one way to do that.
Okay, I noticed on street and alleys that
Yeah.
we're increasing that $61,881.
Yeah.
And they've only used 36% of their budget since the end of August.
We have a project that we have to have completed by October of next year that we estimate, and this is just a rough estimation of cost from what we've heard, that could be anywhere from $80,000 to $150,000 to complete. So we didn't even budget for the entire project in this thing. So his budget is going to be tight. And Tim understands that. We've talked about it. We don't have the luxury of doing this. If we would have added in the entire portion of what we think this project may cost, we would have been up closer to 11 to 12 mil. We increased the budget $105,868.49 over what it was last year, and that may not even cover the cost of that one project.
But yet you're transferring out 20,000.
No, we're hoping to transfer out 20,000. It's not a guarantee. Those year-end transfers are, you did a great job, you saved us some money, you got these projects in under budget, you saved 60,000, let's reward you, let's transfer 10. 20 is just to set a mark for what we're doing. That's why the other ones are at 5, is to say, you guys did a great job, you guys really watched the things, we want to reward you and we want this to go a good way. You saved 15, let's move over 5. Granted, it's not the best win for them, they saved $15,000 and we got 5. But this is how we, again, build our cash forward and build our equipment reserve, make our department heads feel good about what they're doing and how they're spending money, so that they want to save money.
But the fact is, we're doing it at the expense of the taxpayer.
Well, you have
You know,
to be
we
able
can
to build
wait.
this one time.
We don't need new equipment every year.
You're right, but we can't afford to get any new equipment right now. if we do this now, this hopefully says that in the future, we don't have to increase like this. We are closer to our R&R because of what we did this year and the ability that we had establishing this down the road. We don't have to levy $300,000 on our taxpayers for 1 year for anything, for a loader, for anything. We can take it from our equipment reserve because we've been building this thing. We don't have to increase our R&R and our mill levy that much for these pieces of equipment because of what we're doing starting now.
Can we, again, I think you kind of hit on this already, where it says skid loader slash maniac, that's one or the other.
One or the other, that's half of one or the other. When we talked about it with Tim and Steven, they said these are the two pieces of equipment we think are probably getting pretty high up on our list of things we'd like to acquire. We said, let's set aside half. We can't do all of it, and we're not gonna be able to buy both. This is to start us off with a piece of equipment that these guys need to get our equipment rotation and our equipment reserve kick-started and going. So in a year, 2 years, 3 years, we can purchase this thing and show, look what we did. This is how we built it out. Here was our plan. Here's how we followed it and executed it perfectly. That's why that's in there the way it is, so we can show it as our first step in this plan.
When you're talking about like an equipment replacement plan, do we have a plan like that that would show, right, so that kind of the routine, right, that we're figuring out and we can have an idea of, right, what equipment needs to be replaced, let's say 3 to 4 years down the road, as opposed to next year?
So we're working on that right now. We got a lot of equipment that's older and not outdated, it's older. It's still working for us. Obviously, these guys always would like to have some newer equipment that frankly, I think they probably deserve to work hard for. We're building that out right now for each department individually. And then we're gonna build it out and say, here's a piece of equipment that say, theoretically, mini excavator, water, distribution, water plant, street and alley, electric, and sewer could all use. And they get together and they say, okay, here's what we've been contributing to this equipment reserve. Here's what we wanna chip in on this thing to get it done. So then we bring it in here in front of you guys and say, here's the piece of equipment they wanna purchase. Here's what these departments have decided they're willing to allocate for this purchase. From the equipment reserve, what do you think, how do you want us to proceed? That way it makes it an easier decision of, we're not levying $80,000 1 year in the street and alley to buy one of these things. We're building it over time and spreading out what we need to do by convincing our guys to be more fiscally responsible in hopes that it pays off for them down the line.
Some of that equipment also comes out of different departments.
Yeah.
Part of it may be paid by utility, street,
And that won't be split out in here as easily, but it will be in an Excel sheet that I'm building right now to show all this a little easier. It'll show you what departments put in what for what year, what's been expended from those departments, and here's what was purchased, type of thing. That way we can really track how this is working and what it's working for.
I have a question, real quick, on page 5. You have Kansas Power voltage recovery,
Yep.
and the payments due for 2024 is $217,288.
Yep.
If you go to page 11, I believe it is,
Okay.
shows APC Power 12.5 upgrade charges, which is the same.
To 166,622.
Yeah, so, you know, so 246, 991 page 11, and it's 12.5 upgrade. Yeah,
242, 141. Or sorry, 246, 891
yeah,
for 24.
yeah.
So the
What's the
two,
difference in those?
it's that first payment into 25 is what the difference of that is. We will pay out the 246, 891, just like we did when we started out, because of the way the payments roll out, we end up, I think, 2 months into 41 is when our last payment is.
Okay,
It's because of the way the payments roll out.
okay. That's the only question I have.
just on page 11, where it's the utilities. I
Mhm.
I noticed there's quite a few increases there. Is this gonna be an increase in rates or what?
Well, we need to, that's another conversation entirely on its own.
Well, I wanna know where this money's coming from.
Well, that's what we're projecting to bring in, and then these are some of our, what we got, our receipts. Total receipts and resources available are about 5 million, or 3.8 million in receipts, total available 5 million, with the unencumbered cash balance going forward. So again, if we talk about the unencumbered cash balance going forward, our cash balance for our utilities, Scott recommends at 6 to 12 months, I believe. Our utility fund would only be able to sustain about 22.7% of the year with its cash forward for that year. The other thing that this needs to talk about, I'm getting ready to look into and talking with the Lee Kansas municipalities and other cities around the state to see where our rates stack up. Because we have departments, like let's look at sewer. Sewers, to bring in is 314,286. The sewer expenditures are projected at 237,676. That's not a big margin. One thing goes wrong and the sewer can't maintain itself. These are enterprise funds. They have to be able to maintain themselves.
But I think, if we can back up, we should say,
Yep.
I think to your point, this is what you're looking at here, right? Like you big increases here.
Yes, yes.
So those are expenditures.
Oh, okay. You're right. Okay.
But since we're on that, back to what I'm trying to get to some extent. These are enterprise funds. These funds should be sustaining themselves and possibly chipping in to our city ability. If these funds carried more, we wouldn't have had to levy as much now. So these are going to be things that the city really needs to look at going forward with our rates to see, are we competitive? Are we charging what is adequate for our services? Because of the way that these are structured, I mean, there's just not a lot of room. We have one thing go wrong, and trash, sewer, and water are now being floated by the electric department. These funds should be able to self-sustain themselves and be able to build their own cash encumbered balance to where if something happens, say we have a crazy windstorm, we got 20 poles down, it's not a major hit to the city. It's still a major hit. It's not a, we need to figure out where we're gonna get the money right now. It's, we have an unencumbered cash balance. This is what these funds are for. That's what we built this to do, is to be able to take care of some of these things.
Can I speak just a minute? I don't have mic on, is that a problem?
Okay.
Okay, so I was talking to Brogan about this yesterday, and Pratt can't find a finance director, okay, so I've been helping them do a budget. And they raised their electric utility rates last year 21%. And they're looking right now at raising to get to the median in the state of Kansas, their water utilities are under 212% below the average across the state of Kansas. And so they're gonna do over a 3-year period. That's a 71% increase in their water in 1 year. And the reason I bring that up, I live in Gallup. Same thing. If we didn't have $3 million sitting there that we've saved now for the last several years, we are down from 7 wells, we're down to 2. And we don't have the storage capabilities because it's grown. And the other night it got down to the pipe below the actual tower. If there'd been a fire, that house would have probably burned down. There's no way of getting water. So this is all across the state. The utility funds have not been addressed for a long time, and a lot of them are dilapidated, and the pipes and water pipes are. So I'm seeing that quite a bit, and I have to actually kind of commend Pratt to take the bull by the horns, because my house in Galvin, for example, if we don't take care of the water, how much is my house going to be worth? It'll be nothing. I mean, I don't have running water, and there's no way to get running water. We've looked at wells out north of town, about a mile or 2 miles. You can't find it because that was a big oil field. That whole area right there was a big oil field. That's the only way to get it from groundwater. So these are issues, and they have a nitrate issue in Pratt. I'm not, you get yours out of the lake. The 3.58 months of all your utilities together to have cash is very low. That is probably one of the lowest from your side of the city I work with.
And it hasn't been too long ago that we raised the electrical rates, since I've been on the council.
Yeah.
And the water rates for Marion were higher than any city around in Marion County.
I'm not one that says, let's increase the taxes, increase the rates. I'm saying instead of being reactive, the city needs to be proactive, and not just yours. I'm telling all of them that, because if we don't be proactive, like Galvin, we're very proactive right now, trying to figure this out. We may end up, we've been so proactive in Peter, I think we're gonna get a $3 million grant to help fund these wells because of our need. But if you don't have the money, we have to do 75% of that. We have the money to do it, but if you don't have the money to do that, you might not be able to get that $5 million or $4 million grant. So there's just a lot. It's not like a business. Like a business, in my business, if I'm short of money, I go get a line of credit. Bank. City can't do that. You can't borrow. You can either get lease purchase, you can get general obligation bonds, you can get some other types of funding and what's called no fund warrants. And no fund warrants are only when you run out of money, and you do not want no fund warrants. So that's the only way you can borrow if you don't have the cash available, and some kind of something catastrophic came along and you need the cash like that. That's why you have that 6 to 9 months minimum in the utilities, and 6 months really in the general fund.
There's a city that's pretty, in terms of population, they've maybe got 200, 300 more people. I talked to the city manager there and one of their city council members, and they've got $2 million cash forward in their electric utility alone.
And I think one other thing, I'll be quiet, but like Pratt, why they're being proactive now with the nitrates is because they need a new water plant, and they told me that new water plant was $60 million. Now, there are a lot bigger cities than Marion, but even if that was half of that, that you had to come up with, I mean, that's a chunk of change.
I think
So that's becoming a problem across, you see it in the news all the time, the water especially.
I've looked into a couple, and we're looking anywhere from $6 million renovation on our plant to $12 to $20 million completely new plant. This is why we have to build these things, and it has to become self-sufficient. That way, when we have a chance to go out and apply for a grant, we have the backing to say, we have the matching grant. We are committed to doing this. Our rates reflect, that's another thing. If your rates don't reflect with similar cities along your take, they pushes you further down the list. You're not helping yourself, so why should they help you? These are the things we have to address going forward to put Marion in the position that Marion needs to be.
But my point still is that it gets squeeze blood out of these people, our taxpayers. We're taxing them to death. First you wanna raise the budget, almost 9 meals, and then you're thinking about an increase just to build cash. Do you know?
It's not just about
Do you
cash.
know what Hillsborough has in funds over there? They print it out every meeting and give it to their council.
Do I know what Hillsborough has?
Yeah, and so what they have in money, how long they could last, like 3 months or whatever.
Yeah, last time I talked to Matt, his general could last 6 plus, and his utilities is closer to 12. They are very well set up and home. This isn't just about building cash. This is about building the future of Marion and building the infrastructure that the citizens need. I get nobody wants, I don't want to pay more taxes. I like keeping my money too. But I want electricity. I want running water. I want clean water. I want my toilet to flush when it happens. I want good streets to drive on. I don't have to hit a pothole every 10 feet. Just like anybody else. That's how this goes. To be able to do these things, you have to be able to have the money to do it. It's not about, we're not trying to get blood from the turnip. We're trying to put Marion in a position where people come into town and say, This place had unbelievable street quality, it looks fantastic. And then when they say all that, we said, let us show you our water infrastructure. We've really been working on it. We've been putting in a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of time and effort into this. And we're well set up for the next 20, 30, 40 years. It's not about Marion today, it's about Marion when I'm 80 years old and hopefully dead and gone.
But Brogan, I think you're missing the whole point. And I forgot what the population was over 65. Not everybody makes the salary that you make. Some of us live on Social Security and stuff like that. And we're just taxing them to death.
I don't have a question.
No, I don't have anything. Tim?
I'll show you one other thing. If you look on the utility fund on page 11.
Yep.
It was kept flat in the receipt side, okay? So every one of those receipts is the same in 22, 23, and 24, okay? So I think most of anybody here would understand that if you're at 8% inflation and you leave the receipt side, it's like at home. If you leave the receipt side flat, what's going to happen to the bottom line? Well, 8% in 22, 8% in 23, and if there's another 8% in 24, you're down 24% based on the locked-in amount in the 3 years up there. And I just try to help, all summer long, help people see that, because prices aren't getting any cheaper. And if you leave the receipt side at home or in the city at the same, what's going to happen to the cash? The cash is gone. And you can't use credit cards, you can't use line of credit. So that's why it's not about building cash, it's about sustaining the operations you've got in all of your funds across the board, not just utility company. I just, it's got to be watched over like that. It's not about, you're not really squeezing the taxpayer, you're trying to go along and make your city a sustainable city.
That's better.
On page 11, down at the bottom on capital improvement, we have $1,200,000 under
That's
the water plant.
yeah, so that is what the City of Marion was approved for in the KPSLF money. So that's added in because that is available to us. No, I do not believe it's a good time for us to go out and borrow that money. But it is in there because it is available to the city.
We also understand there's some grants available through the state this year that will assist us.
And they're trying to go to electric, so they haven't quite dropped all of them yet, so we're watching that pretty hard. But again, that's another reason why we've got to address our rates and address where our system is currently at. We have to make ourselves competitive with other cities our size and make sure we're holding the standard across the state. That way, when we apply to these grants, we're not cast aside because we're not trying to help ourselves. That is, in one way or another, that is almost a direct response I've seen from someone who applied for a water grant, it's for wastewater. They said until you help they didn't say it, they said until your rates reflect an average of the state, your grant isn't going to be approved. You don't bring in enough money to pay for this project. Why should we help you get it granted in if you're not going to be able to sustain this project and sustain this plan?
Is that 1.2 million, is that next year application? I know you applied this year, but it would be funded.
It would be funded next year. I believe it would be funded second quarter of next year is when they would be announcing and doing that.
And payments would be made till the project's completed, and that could be 2025.
Or 2025, even into 2026. I believe they have a hard deadline of 2026. Your project's supposed to be completed, or at least payments are going to be started.
How far does 1.2 million get you?
Not very far.
Well,
Not on our water
Actually,
plant.
that's
I mean,
pretty good.
it could do some
what is basically for the ozone
Yeah.
generators. And they're not that expensive, but our problem is our plant's not plumbed for the new style generators they're making. They no longer make the Mitsubishi, which we currently are using. So if we buy new, we're gonna have to replumb at the same time.
I think the ozone itself was
About 700,000.
700, and the other was to retrograde the plant to more adequately use and operate the ozone.
Well, we would have funds available if you currently paying the school for the swimming pool. And
Which
their
is
operation, which
last
is last
payment's in
payment
24.
in 2024.
Yep.
So that could be utilized for that.
Yep,
$136,000 or something.
Yes.
yes, that's the.
$136,000, and I would imagine a $1.2 million grant would be somewhere in that. The payment, yearly payment would be somewhere in
Yeah.
that area. So it's a possibility. But that's something we will look at down the road.
Couple other things I might just mention, so like you brought up the rate, but if you look at the very last page, right after the publication, there's what's called neighborhood revitalization. And I've worked with that for years at the county level, and it's been adjusted at different times, but that alone is 1 mil off of your mill that you publish. So what happens there is even though you may levy the tax of 74, you're only gonna get 73. Because that $12,000 is 1 mil, so it comes off, you pay it in, and then you get netted out. So that's 1 mil that you don't have, even though it shows that
Yeah.
you're getting it on the publication.
1.2 million.
The other thing is, if you look on page 4 and you divide your debt, I do this sometimes, I just take almost $5 million and divide it by the mill, 1 mil, just to see how many mills it would take to pay off your debt, okay? 419 mills just to pay off your debt. Now, some of this debt is utility debt, so it wouldn't be a mill necessarily, but there's something there that, there, not only you have the cost of inflation, but you have this debt that's sitting there, and, you're paying, some of these are lower interest, which you wouldn't want to pay off with the interest income that you got going right now. The rates, that saved a lot of the governments this summer. The 90-day T-bill rate is about 5.1 or 2 at the state of Kansas, and that's what governments are supposed to be getting on their idle funds. And that makes a lot of difference, like at the county, especially if they have a lot more money, that's sitting there they've distributed. But if you had the money available, and that $2 million, like Brogan was talking about, $2 million times 5% is $100,000, and that's 10 mils. So that allows other dollars to come in from other places to help fund your budget. There's just a lot of things like that moving forward here.
Any other questions from the council? Move on to number 5, public forum. Does anyone wish to speak to the council?
I'll just stand back here, I'm sure you can hear me. I had just a couple of questions from the discussion that went on. It just sounds like we should have started this savings plan a long time ago. For one thing, years ago, the plan for emergency, sounds like it's been put off for a very long time. And the other thing is, could we not, if there's this much an increase, spread it over several years and not just boom all at once? It's something to consider. Next year add a little bit more and a little more, instead of just all at once. Since the economy seems to be in such an uproar right now anyway. The other thing was you said about the truck, that you needed a new truck. But a new one that would go up taller. But it won't go through the alleys.
No, this one will go through.
It will, okay. I was gonna say, if we're going for 3 hours, I don't know.
That would have been pointless, no, yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Eric Meyer. Speaking as a business owner, not as a journalist, no one disputes the notion we need to have good water, we need to have good roads, we need to have this amount in balance in the bank and so on, but we're talking about increasing taxes by roughly 9 mils. Not talking about any of those things. We're gonna increase the cemetery by about 1 mil. We're gonna increase the museum by about 2 mils. We're gonna increase parks by about 1 mil, that's 4 mils. We're gonna increase municipal court by 2 mils or more. I don't understand that at all. We're gonna increase economic development by 2 mils. We're gonna increase the police department by roughly 6 mils, in not reflecting any savings that happened this year when half the department's been vacant. We're gonna increase community enrichment by roughly 3 mils. That's more than your 9 mils, and none of that's attacking the water plant, the streets, or anything else. Where are those increases coming from? And I would like to know, just honestly, when did my elected representatives vote for the needs for those increases that I just outlined?
Well, I probably can answer that. We didn't vote for it.
When was the first review of the budget that was published in the Marion Record last week held?
Tonight,
July 5th.
Why?
Our first review was July 5th.
There were no amounts in the July 5th budget.
Don't we as a public need to know? I mean, I've sat here and agreed with some of the things that you're trying to increase. But then I have questions as to why we're not aware of these things beforehand, when the budget is already published. Is this the same budget that was published in the paper?
this is paper. This budget that we reviewed tonight is the one that was published in the paper.
Okay, thank you.
We keep talking about responsibility, budgeting, but it's not only increases to the taxpayer, it's also with you guys on your spending. When I look at the packets each week on some of this spending, I just don't see other cities buying all this other stuff, buying tools all the time, flyers all the time. We have no accountability out that city shop. And as far as all this equipment, you can't tell me that they need all this equipment. Then what I don't like is when we get newcomers coming in that don't realize what's going on in the past. This city, past years, they've operated on some older stuff. We're not a construction company that travels, we're local. So you don't have that problem with all these trucks and everything have to worry about breaking down out on the road. You're local. That makes no sense. The excavator, skid loader. If you want to buy the bucket truck you got, buy it back. We got the 14 bucket truck. When I went back and reviewed that, in 14, they said, oh no, we're going to get a new lease and get rid of the old 14 model. That didn't happen. They got the lease and they kept the 14 model. And was also told at that time, oh yeah, Brogan,
We don't have a 14.
it's listed in the,
There's a lot of equipment listed on there that's not in there. It's harder to go into our system and take it out than it is to remove the line item. We don't own one.
so how many trucks we got? What years are they?
I think in 94, 98, and 17.
No, I'm talking bucket trucks.
98
We got
and
2000,
17.
we got 2000 model high Ranger high lift. We got an 18 model.
2008 and 2009.
Thank you. 2008, 2009. 2008 and 2009.
Okay, so we only have those two plus the high lift
The big.
and the auger truck. When we got these other this 18 model, that's what they told us then, that they needed this one because it had more of a reach on it. Now we're wanting one bigger yet. I just can't see it. We're not, you look at the equipment that this construction company that was in here working, that done the build out. We've got the build out done basically, other than some update needs to be done on the old stuff now. But you look at that equipment he was using. Did you look at it, Mayfield? You're the mayor. Did you watch him any?
Watch what?
When they was building the electric lines and stuff in town. They had old trucks.
I didn't watch them every day.
Well, that's probably undoubtable. A lot of things you haven't done. But
You know what? We
But
don't-
anyways,
Darvin.
I'm telling you that,
Darvin, your time's up. Your 5 minutes is up.
okay, but I do want to say something along the lines on the budget for the, planning commission. I sat here and heard him talk about how we need to build fundings for all the other things, but except the planning commission. Now, let me tell you, if you really want to do something, instead of raising mill levies, look at funding, the planning, get that stuff done, get it, we're only as good as the books. You will build your assessed values by having good zoning. You can build your values up. And it's completely stupid not to work towards that, on getting that done. Because that's where your assessed values come from, making sure everything's in the proper places.
Why don't you
And-
come,
and-
why don't you come back to the commission with a plan, with the council with a plan?
Well,
I don't know what you need, so. you-
Well, we had the money set aside to try to get some of this done. They was gonna, the last guy that we had talked to, he was going to work 2 different years. 1 year we could give him half of it, and then the following year we was gonna try to get some more money in the budget to pay the remainder of
Okay,
it.
but
But
we're talking about budgeting.
exactly, that's what I'm talking about, the $30,000.
We can't talk about what, we can only talk about the budget for 2024. So come back with a plan.
Exactly, this only has 5,000 in it. So for us to build our fundings, they take it, but everybody else can have some money left over to go towards what they need, equipment or whatever. That's my point.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, same sign. Motion carries.